Introduction section. There's a kind of noise in our world that we've gotten used to. A distortion flowing through our screens. A constant flicker. A constant pull. We don't really talk about it, yet it shapes us, quietly and deeply. It distorts us. It rewires us, piece by piece. It's a distortion, what we've accepted as normal. The screen says it's harmless. The world repeats that it's empowering. But beneath the pixels lies a warning we can no longer choose to disregard.
Section 1. The glitch. Pornography claims to show intimacy, but what it really shows is a virus, a breach, a glitch. There's a glitch forming in the human heart, a crack made by repetition, by numbness, by disconnection, a distortion of what real connection should feel like. It dims empathy. It disrupts communication. It leaves both viewers and the people around them feeling less whole. We trade real touch for artificial intensity. We trade vulnerability for control. We trade connection for illusion. Every time the screen lights up, something inside dims. A piece of intimacy lost. A piece of empathy muted. A piece of humanity glitched. Pornography shows the body but hides the person. Shows the act but erases the soul. This is not freedom. This is not empowerment. This is erosion.
Section 2. Women. Pornography tells us it's just entertainment, just pixels, just bodies, just fun. Pornography tells us it's just entertainment, but behind the glossy surface, it teaches harmful ideas about women. Ideas that say women exist to be used, not understood. That their boundaries don't matter. That their value is in how they look, not who they are. Pixels have weight. Images have power. And repetition reshapes reality. It trains the mind to see women not as people, but as performers. Not as partners, but as props. Research shows that repeated exposure increases aggressive attitudes toward women, normalizes disrespect, blurs the line between intimacy and domination. Women become pixels, people become props, humanity becomes noise. Pornography teaches that women's pain is entertainment, that their boundaries are negotiable, and that their purpose is to satisfy. Over time, empathy dulls, compassion thins, respect erodes. What used to be unthinkable becomes normal.
Section 3. Relationships. In relationships, pornography changes expectations. It rewires desire around fantasy, something curated, edited, exaggerated, and impossible. Partners begin to compare themselves to bodies that were never meant to be real. Affection grows distant. Connection becomes harder. Trust fractures. Pornography doesn't just affect the viewer. In relationships, pornography becomes a ghost, hovering silently between partners. It affects the person waiting beside them, wondering why they feel less seen. Expectations shift toward the impossible. The perfect body, perfect performance, the perfect submission. Real intimacy becomes less interesting than edited illusion. Touch loses meaning. Trust becomes even more fragile. Connection becomes comparison. People begin to wonder, why am I not enough? Why can't I compete with a fantasy? Why does love feel quieter than the screen? Pornography doesn't just alter desire. It alters how we see each other.
Section 4. Addiction. The brain is built to adapt, but constant, high stimulus forces it to chase novelty more extreme, more intense, more shocking. The brain wasn't designed for endless novelty, but pornography never ends. Scroll after scroll, shock after shock, until the brain adapts in self-defense. Dopamine surges. Tolerance grows. Curiosity shifts to compulsion. What once felt uncomfortable becomes interesting. What once felt wrong becomes exciting. What once felt extreme becomes necessary. For many people, that chase becomes a loop, a compulsion, private cycle of shame and secrecy that leaves them disconnected from real intimacy and from themselves. Addiction doesn't always look like chaos on the outside. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's hidden, but it always leaves a mark. This is how addiction starts, with chaos, with quiet consumption, a hidden loop of craving, shame, numbness, repeat. Behind the screen, someone whispers, just one more, and the loop tightens.
Section 5. Mental health. Pornography is sold as an escape, but it feeds anxiety, intensifies loneliness, and deepens depression. It numbs emotional connection, strains self-esteem, and corrodes self-worth. Users say they feel empty, detached, ashamed, yet they return, not out of desire, but out of habit, out of hunger, out of lust, out of compulsion, chasing a high that becomes further and further out of reach. There becomes a craving to fill a bottomless pit, to satisfy an overwhelming urge. The mind becomes both prisoner and guard. Locked inside a room, it doesn't know how to leave.
Section 5. Children and adolescents. And then there are the young. Kids growing up with smartphones before they understand what they're seeing. Exposure can happen by accident, but the impact is intentional. Confusion, fear, unrealistic ideas of sex and consent. A shaping of identity before it has time to grow. Porn becomes their first teacher when it never should have been one at all. They learn from strangers on a screen, acting out scenarios created for entertainment, not education. Confusion, fear, arousal, shame. A cocktail their young minds cannot process. Porn becomes their teacher, their reference point, their definition of intimacy before they even know what intimacy is. It shapes their desires before they can choose them. It shapes their identities before they can question them.
Section 7. Sexual aggression and dangerous behavior. The more extreme the content, the more numb the mind becomes to violence. Pornography normalizes aggression domination without consent, choking without allowance, pain without compassion.
People begin to reenact what they see without knowing how damaging it is. To themselves, to their partners, to what intimacy is meant to be. Studies show the pattern. The more violent the porn, the more aggressive the behavior. The more malicious the scene, the more acceptable maliciousness feels. Fantasy bleeds into reality, and boundaries blur until they break.
Section. Reclamation. But distortion can be recognized. Awareness is powerful. Glitches can be corrected. Reality can be reclaimed. When we see the distortion, we can step outside it. We can choose boundaries. We can choose connection. We can choose respect for ourselves, for women, for partners, and for the next generation. When we understand the cost, we can change the pattern. We can choose connection over consumption, respect over objectification, intimacy over illusion, for ourselves, for the women erased by the lens, for the partners who feel unseen, for the children who deserve better, for the minds that deserve peace, for the lives exploited behind the scene. Closing section. Real love cannot be streamed. Real intimacy cannot be downloaded. Real connection asks us to be present, vulnerable, human, authentic. We can turn off the noise. We can step out of the distortion. We can become human again. The distortion doesn't vanish on its own, but once we see it, once we acknowledge it, its power begins to fade. We don't have to live inside the glitch. We can choose something real connection that isn't scripted, intimacy that isn't manipulation, love that isn't built on harm. Awareness is the first step. Reclaiming our humanity is the next. In the end, the screen doesn't love you back. You can shut it down. You can rewrite the code. You can terminate the machine. You can walk away. You can reconnect. Pornography distorts you. It rewires your instincts and numbs your empathy. Pornography thins your connection to who matters the most and convinces you that intensity is the same thing as intimacy. It is not. You deserve something real. Something that doesn't drain you, use you, manipulate you, exploit you, or overwrite you. You're not a wired machine running corrupted code. You're a person created for emotion, authenticity, connection, affection, soulful experience, and genuine love. Escape the distortion. Remove the virus. Eliminate the glitch. You are worth more than what the screen has taught you to settle for. Taglines. See through.